got it. 3 people have entered the waiting room. Kath, Alan, Charles. Well,
Okay.
good morning. Good morning. That's a good one. Good evening, everybody. So we're live. We're live on YouTube as well. So, oh dear. Charles. Well, good morning. Good morning. That's a good one. Good I hate this. Everybody. So we're live. We're live on YouTube as well. So, oh dear. There we go. No matter how I prepare and I turn myself off, there's always a screen that pops up and I start talking again. There we go. I've got rid of myself. So yeah, hi guys. Good for everyone to be on. Welcome to those people who are on YouTube. Message me, guys, if you're on YouTube. Let me know you're there, so I know who's watching. But yeah, this is the first one that we're going to do through March on the some of the values of the church, and I'm just going to, hopefully, says he, share my screen. That's the plan. So
you just need to mute everyone.
Okay. What? Is that better? You can't answer me now, can you? Because I muted you. Best way to get peace if you're married, mute your wife. That's the best thing to do, isn't it, guys? Whoever invented Zoom was definitely a married man. She'll tell me off for that later. So I'm just going to share the screen just to go through, because some of you may or may not know what some of the values are for the church. So I'm just going to pop this up to begin with, so that we can see. Get rid of that. Can you all see that properly? Can you see that okay, guys? Put your thumbs up if you can see it okay. Yeah, okay. So hopefully you should be able to see that properly. Christ's heart values. I've taken the each letter. There is a fancy name for this. I'm not too sure what it is, but you take every letter and you put a value against. So we have compassion, honesty and integrity, respect, influence, servant leadership, teamwork, sowing, humility, empathy, attitude, resilience, and transformation. Those are the values that we believe that are important as a church that we should uphold and that we should follow. Now, today we're going to look at the value of compassion, and we've all heard about values, and we've seen that some companies have values, things like that. Different companies have values, and generally when a company has values, it's there to create a culture within their company of a certain way of behaving, certain attitude that they want people to have. Now, why we'd have values in a church is because we want to be known for certain things as a church. There was it was actually Premier Christian Radio did a survey some time back, and they asked in the survey if there was a difference between Christian and non-Christian behavior, and whether there should be a difference between how a Christian and how a non-Christian behaves. And the response that they got from the survey was quite interesting. It says, many said that whilst there should be a difference between the way a Christian and a non-Christian behaves, sadly, no one can tell the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian because their behavior is very similar. Now, that's a very sad thing to say when we are looking at a church, when we're looking at Christians, because, our life and our behavior and our attitude should speak to people that we are different, that there's something about us that is different to, the non-Christian people. I'm not saying that we're better than anybody else or there's anything wrong with them, but we should be known for being more Christ-like. So the various values, I want to look at compassion, and I just want to just explain about values a little bit more. What is a value? So before we go any further, a value is a principle or a foundation that influences and directs the way you live and how people respond to people and circumstances. Okay, so a value is a principle or a foundation that influences and directs the way you live. Now, when we make a decision to live out of an intention which is influenced by a value, it affects every area of our life. Now, what's that mean? In other words, when we make up our mind that when something happens, for example, if you hold to the fact that a value of yours would be to be kind to people. Now, when something happens to you and someone treats you unkindly, if you hold to a value of being kind to people, that it should influence the way you respond back to that person who has treated you unkindly. Because no matter how that person has treated you, your value, the principle or the foundation of your life is saying to you that, let me just admit somebody, that we should be living in a kind way. So it affects the way you believe. Now, Christians, all the values that we're going to look at are all found in the Bible. All the values that we're going to look at are values that Jesus spoke about and that Jesus lived. So there's nothing new there. But the value that we're going to look at in terms of compassion should be our benchmark. It should be our yardstick to measure our lives against, so that we can make changes, and by God's grace that we can make changes so that, for example, we become more compassionate. Yeah. So we become more honest. I remember I think I've told you the story. I went when it was my stag night. I went out with somebody who couldn't come, and we just went out for a meal, and it was down Merry Hill when the waterfront was somewhere worth going. And we went to an Indian restaurant there, and in fact, he was a pastor of a local church, and we went for the Indian, and the bill came and they'd undercharged us. Now, I looked at the bill and I thought straight away, because I wanted to be honest, that we should tell the restaurant that they'd made a mistake. The pastor that I was with, he couldn't care less. He was like, well, I ain't paying any more. If they're going to undercharge us, that's their problem. But for me, the value of being honest was a principle or the foundation of who I was. And I wanted to be honest. And I wanted to tell the restaurant that they'd made a mistake with the bill. And I did. And they came and they changed the bill and they charged us more. Now, you might think, what a stupid thing to do. Why would you do that? Why? Because for me, the value of being honest, the foundation that was in my life to be honest, was guiding me, and it was causing me to behave in a certain way. Now, Jesus was an honest person, and he also would have behaved in an honest way. I've got people flying in here. They're all late, but they're all coming on. So Jesus said that we are to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, didn't he? We are to be in the epistles. It said that we are to be changed from glory to glory into the image of Jesus. Now, what do values do? They help with our accountability. Okay, because if you listen to people, and the way people talk these days is, I can do what I want. You can't tell me what to do. I can do what I want. And if I want to be dishonest, I'll be dishonest. If I want to be late, I'll turn up late. If I want to have no integrity, whatever I think is right is right. My truth is my truth. I don't really care what your truth is. But yet, when we have values and principles that form the foundation of our life, if we take them away, not only would we personally be in chaos, but the society we lived in would be in chaos, because everybody would be living by their own set of rules. And that's generally where we are at, really, in society, because the Bible provides all these foundational principles in our lives that we should live by. And the problem with many Christians is that they don't live by them. Now, like I said, we're going to look at the value of compassion. And then at the end, I've got a few questions that I want to ask everybody. Not a quiz, But I just want to ask regarding the value of compassion, how it would affect your life and how you could grow to be more compassionate as a person. Okay, so I want to define what it is. You know me by now. I'm going to define what the value of compassion is all about. Then I'm going to give you, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 or so verses out of the Bible to explain a little bit more about what Jesus said about compassion, about God being compassionate. And then looking at how we can develop to become more compassionate people. Now, it is true that some people find this easier than others. You know, it depends what your makeup as a person is. Some people find it to be easy to be compassionate, and other people find it a little bit harder. Depends their personality makeup. But nevertheless, Jesus is our example of how we should be compassionate to people. So the definition of compassion is this: to recognize the suffering and misfortune of others with sympathetic pity and concern, and then take action to help. Okay? To recognize the suffering and misfortune of others with sympathetic pity and concern, and take action to help that person. So if you show somebody kindness and care and have a willingness to help somebody, by definition, you're showing compassion. Okay? So when we walk past the homeless guy sat on the streets in Birmingham, instead of kicking his cup from underneath him so all his money gets knocked all over the floor, we actually show some care and concern towards him. Okay? Now, the literal meaning of the word compassion means to suffer together. And I'm going to show you how Jesus suffered together in order to be compassionate. Now, if you got your Bible, let's go to Matthew chapter 9. Matthew 9, verse 32. And for some of those guys who came on afterwards, hi to everybody. Hi to John, to Kath, to Alan, to Andrew, to Natasha in Uganda. And to the guys who are on YouTube, text me so I know who's there. Matthew 9, verse 36 reads this. Well, I'll read 35. Why do people always do that? They quote a verse and then they read the one before. Why don't we just say 35 and 36? But anyway, Jesus went about the cities and villages, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he had saw the multitude, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep, having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest. So we can see there that Jesus, in verse 36, was moved with compassion because he saw the way, the state of the person, the state of people. And, you know, as Christian people, we should, I don't want to start putting judgment on people, but we need to allow the Spirit of God to work in us so that we can too be moved with compassion. Because quite often we get quite hard that when we see somebody who is suffering or have misfortune, we just think, well, that's tough, isn't it? You know, that's up to them. That's their fault. And then we walk off and we don't bother to do anything to help them. But as a church, I want us to be a group of people who, like Jesus, was moved with compassion. If you go to the book of Mark, chapter 1, Mark 1, verse 41, and it says there what Jesus did. Mark 1, verse 41. Mark chapter 1, verse 41 says, Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand, touched him being the leper, and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. So Jesus saw the plight of the leper. He didn't look at him with judgment. He didn't look at him and say, you fool, what have you done? What's got you into that mess? And walk off. But Jesus looked at him and said, well, he was moved with compassion. There we go, Janet, you're in. He stretched out his hand, touched him, and in effect, he healed the man. And it's interesting that when for us to see healing, and we pray that God would heal people, and we pray that God would do something in people's lives. And yet the interesting thing is that Jesus was first moved with compassion before he stretched out his hand to the leper. Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think sometimes we need to learn compassion for people. Let's go to Psalms 86. Psalm 86, verse 15. But you, O Lord, are a God full of compassion and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in mercy and truth. You, O Lord, are a God full of compassion and gracious. Now, who lives inside of us? The Spirit of God. So if the Spirit of God lives inside of us and he dwells inside of us, and we want to learn to get out of the way, in effect, and allow the Spirit of God to flow through us to people, then the God who is full of compassion and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in mercy and truth must flow through us to people. Would you agree? Yeah, let's go to Psalm 145. I find the best way I'm not trying to win an argument, but the best way to explain what I want to say is to show you from the word. And that's the easiest, for me, that's the easiest way to do it. Psalm 145, verse 8. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion. The world we live in certain places, is the complete opposite. They have no compassion for people. They are cold and hard in terms of their heart. And yet, the one prayer that I've prayed over the years many times is that I would always keep a sensitive heart. I would always keep a heart that's supple and soft and tender, so that I can be a person who is compassionate to people, so that I'm not the person to walk past the homeless man. I'm not the person who walks past the old lady struggling with the shopping, but I'm the one who goes to help the old lady with the shopping. Simple things like that, because we're showing kindness to her. A lady got stuck in our road because we live at the bottom of a very small slope a couple of years ago when it snowed. Never spoke to her and her husband from when we moved in, but she couldn't get up the hill because it was icy and snowy one morning. I was walking my dog, took the dog home, pushed her up the hill. Ever since then, every time I see her and her husband, they stop and they chat. How are you doing? A simple act of kindness, which is born out of being compassionate, willing to help somebody, changes people's lives. Let's go to the New Testament, 1 Peter. Let's go to the book of Peter, 1 Peter, chapter 3, verse 8 and 9. 1 Peter 3, verse 8 and 9. Finally, all of you, be of one mind, having compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. All of you be of one mind. In other words, agree on this thing. We are going to be compassionate for one another, loving as brothers, tender-hearted and courteous to people. And as a church, that is one of the values that I want us to hold to, that we are a compassionate people, that when people walk through the door, they see our love for one another, and they feel initially and they sense our love for them. Yeah, that we are tender-hearted and courteous to one another. We're not rude, we're not nasty. I've said from day one that when people come, that as soon as they walk through the door, we smile, we greet, we say hello, we welcome them. We get to know people. It is a sad indictment when people go to a church and nobody talks to them. And I've been there. I've been to a church and I just sit there in the middle of all the people and no one even says hello to me. What a sad church that is if people can't even say hello to somebody when they walk through the door. Let's go to Hebrews. Let's go to Hebrews 5. Hebrews 5, verse 2. Well, I'll start in verse 1. For every high priest taken from among men is appointed for many things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin. He can deal gently with compassion on those who are ignorant, going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. One of the foundations, I believe, of being able to have compassion or being compassionate to people is realizing that we are not perfect people ourselves and that we are weak people and we only exist by God's grace. When we realize that and get a good revelation of that, then from that we can say, that we can be compassionate to people. Let's go to James 1. I've got a few more verses. James chapter 1, verse 19. So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. You think, what's that got to do with compassion? Because you know what? Some people need to be listened to. And sometimes we are more concerned with what we have to say than listening to what the other person has to say. And you know what? Being compassionate at times is being willing to listen to what somebody else has got to say and what they're going through and being able to be sympathetic to them in order to be able to help them. Let's go to James 5. Another verse. James 5, verse 11. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. See, if we'd have been around Job and Job was whinging about some of the things he was going through and some of the things he was struggling with, okay, put Job in church. And there's somebody there who's going through a similar experience to what Job went through for whatever reason. Would we be willing to show compassion to that person and listen to what he had to say? Or do we think to ourselves, stuff, would you just shut up, get over yourself? Just a thought. To show compassion to somebody is being willing to listen. If we go to Lamentations chapter 3, for those who don't know where Lamentations is, it's in the Old Testament. I'm sure you know, really. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22 to 25. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I hope in him. Through the Lord's mercies, we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. How compassionate is God to us? We saw in that verse in Mark, the compassion moved Jesus to stretch out his hand to heal the leper. John chapter 13, Gospel of John. John chapter 13, verse 35. John 13, verse 35 says this, when I can find it. Or 34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Now, that's a tough one for some people, because, you know, we are very self-centered. We are very selfish. We are concerned with ourselves, what we can get, what we can do. And sometimes we fail to realize that our life is a letter to people. Our life is that testimony that people are watching, and they watch how you behave, and they watch how Christians behave, and they watch how we talk to each other, and they watch how we react to each other, and they watch what we say, what we do, how we behave. And, you know, rightly or wrongly, some people look at the way Christians behave and say, I don't, if that's the way, if that's what it's like to be a Christian, then I'm not interested. I've had many people say that to me. If that's what it's like to be a Christian, I'm having none of it. And yet Jesus is saying here, love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, in other words, by this act of loving each other, people will know that you are my disciples. Now, just that is a challenge in itself. Do we love people? You know, I've said on Sundays, church is a two-way thing. We have a relationship with God, but we're in the people business. And we have to allow our relationship with God to affect how we treat people. And, you know, I can look at the way people treat people, and that tells me something of what their relationship with God is like. Jesus is saying here, by loving each other as I have loved you, people will know that you are my disciples. Let's go to Romans 9. This is the last verse I'm going to quote for now. I've got a few more to come, but Romans 9 verse 15. Romans 9 verse 15 says, for he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whomever I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whomever I will have compassion. You know, sometimes we think that people should be treated in a certain way based on what they've done, which is true. But God says here, I will have compassion on whomever I choose. So, you know, there are times when our judgments and our opinions have to be put to one side, because we're not God, we're not judge and jury. And our focus should be on, how can I show compassion to this person or that person? And you know what? Not even thinking of other people, because some of us, the question isn't how can I show compassion to other people? It's actually, how can I show compassion to myself? Because for some of us, before we can show compassion to other people, some of us need to show a little bit of compassion towards ourselves. Yeah. Now, I said before, how did Jesus suffer? I said the literal definition of to have compassion was to suffer together. How did Jesus suffer? He took our sickness, our pain, our sin, our suffering upon himself, so that we don't have to do that and be that and experience that anymore. That is how compassionate Christ was towards us. That's the example that we've got to follow. He suffered, he took sickness on himself so that we don't have to be sick anymore. He took pain, he suffered so that we don't have to anymore. Now, I know that we live in a world that is fallen, and bad stuff happens, and sometimes bad stuff happens to good people. Yeah. But in the middle of all of that, Christ still came and died to remove the sickness, the pain, the suffering, because he is a God who is compassionate to his people. And as we have the same Holy Spirit who lives inside of us, we've got to learn and grow in how to be compassionate. Now, what I want to do is become incredibly practical. I'm pretty practical anyway, but I want to come out and give you some examples of what a compassionate person is like, some characteristics of what a compassionate person is like, and then how we can grow in becoming more compassionate. Okay. And hopefully I can get that all in before time is up. Now, a compassionate person, if you want to write some of these down, a compassionate person comprehends, connects, and understands and accepts people for who they are and where they are on their journey. Yet, a compassionate person comprehends, he understands, connects, and accepts people for who they are. You know, sometimes, I say it again, sometimes we don't know the story behind a person's life. And sometimes because we don't have that understanding, we can be, at times, I'm not saying we are always like this, but at times we can be judgmental of somebody's behavior because we don't know where they've come from and what they're going through. And yet a compassionate person accepts people for who they are on that journey without casting judgment on them. Another area is a compassionate person will always choose to see the good in another. Will choose to see the good in another. By being compassionate, we are always able to support others to achieve their dream and their goal in life. And if you've heard me over the weeks, one of the things I've said several times is that as a church, we want to help people achieve their dreams and achieve their goals in life. And for some, they don't know what they are. So we'll help and support people as they discover what God has called them to do. And then we support people to help them do it. If you go to Ephesians 4, verse 2, it says there, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, we bear with one another in love. So sometimes, whilst a person doesn't understand who they are, doesn't understand what they're called to do, and their mind is just frazzled because of the things that they're going through, we support them, we love them, and we care for them to help them achieve what God has called them to achieve. Next, a compassionate person lives a life of intention, lives a life of purpose. Okay? They seek to use integrity in every aspect of their life first, to be respectful to themselves. And out of this respect for themselves, they look to inspire and others and have an impact on others by standing up for their values, principles, and beliefs. So first, we have to be able to have compassion on ourselves, understand where we are in our journey with God. Don't beat ourselves up because we're not where we want to be. But for most of us, we're not where we were, but we're not where we may want to be. Ultimately, we're on a journey. And from that respect of ourselves, of what God is doing in us, we can extend that same compassion to somebody else whilst they are going through difficult times. The next one, a compassionate person cares for people without judgment. Now, this is difficult for some because most of us will have ingrained prejudices that we've grown up with, that people have put into us without us realizing. Maybe parents, maybe schools, maybe our peers, the media even. So we have ingrained prejudices, we have expectations, we have past hurt, we have pain, we have trauma that we've been through. Sometimes for some people, we are full of self-pity and anger. We're sad. We have loads of emotions. And quite often, those emotions and that belief system subconsciously guide our conscious behavior. Yeah, because many of us respond without even realizing. I could say certain things to certain people and they would come back with a racist comment because of some ingrained prejudice from their childhood. They would look at a certain group of people and they would respond in a certain way.
That's how even when it comes to Christian people, you talk to some folk, and because they've been hurt in church, their instant response is one of anger because of something that happened to them. But as Christians, we have to care for people without judging them. So when a person has been hurt, when they've gone through rejection and they've come through difficult things, we have to be compassionate, love, care for them without judgment. Yep. So showing compassion to people is not a sign of weakness. It's actually an incredible strength to be able to accept people the way they are. Now, being a compassionate person doesn't mean that we have to accept the way people treat us. It merely shows that we don't allow their actions to define how we behave towards them. Because you know what? You're going to get treated badly. You're going to get emails sent to you that are going to call you a few choice words. You're going to walk down the street and people are not going to like you for whatever reason. But you know what? Because you have compassion, that value of compassion as your bedrock in life, your principle, your foundation, you don't let that their behavior towards you cause you to behave badly back to them. But your compassion causes you to want to help them despite how they treat you. See, we all crave acceptance. And by showing compassion to people and caring for people, for some of us, that actually helps to bring healing in our own lives. So it's a two-way street. We need to show compassion to ourselves, but as we step out the boat and think, from Sunday, I'm going to sow a seed of being compassionate to somebody, it actually starts to bring a harvest of acceptance and love in your own life. And that is really, really important. So some more characteristics of a compassionate person. We don't react to the negative ways in which people treat us, but we choose to see a lesson and embrace the moment without reacting. We think about why a person behaved in a certain way, and in response, we don't respond or we don't react negatively, but we choose to respond in a positive way. Yeah, so if you go to Ephesians 4, verse 31, it says this: let all bitterness, wrath and anger, clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. So, we will be in situations in life where people will say negative things and bad things to you. But our response is to respond not out of bitterness, not out of anger, not out of evil speaking, not to gossip and to start spreading rumors about them, but we are kind to them, tender-hearted. We forgive them, even as Christ has forgiven us. And a compassionate person will always seek to influence others through thoughtful words and kind acts of kindness. For example, that could be that they're generous with their time. Another one, they uplift, guide, and support those around them to achieve the best in every aspect of their lives. We uplift, guide, and support those who are around us. There's certain people that if you want help and support from, you go to. And there's certain people that you avoid because you know that they're not going to give you any. That's true. Hebrews 4, verse 16. Let us therefore, this is talking about the compassionate high priest. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Now, Jesus, the high priest, is compassionate towards us to help us in our time of need. We need to become more compassionate so that we can extend that arm of grace to help others in their time of need. Being compassionate allows us to connect with people easily, respectfully, regardless of that person's age, gender, culture, religion, language, ethnicity, ethnicity, and I can't even say the word, but you know what I mean. Ethnicity, that one. There's certain words I can't say. I need to put my teeth in properly. Being compassionate allows us to connect easily and respectfully with anyone, regardless of their age, gender, culture, religion, language, or ethnicity, and whatever. You know, I have no problem. Last year during lockdown, this will make some people's hair fall out now. I have a friend who's a Muslim guy in New York. And he came to me and said, would you preach in our mosque on Zoom? Okay. So there were several imams, so several pastors in our language, several imams there. And there was probably 100 Muslim people on Zoom. And he said, would you come and talk to the mosque about who Jesus is? Now, some Christians would have wet themselves. I can't do that. How can I go and talk? I said, sure, no problem. So I'm on Zoom on a Sunday afternoon because they're in New York. And I had an hour with the mosque talking to all the people about who Christ was and who Christ is. They enjoyed it so much, they asked me to go back 2 weeks later. And I did it again. Now, if you are compassionate, you can connect with anybody. Those were, I know Christian people who say, I won't even talk to a Muslim person. What a load of rubbish. Yeah. We talk to compassion causes us, it motivates us to be able to relate to any age, any gender, any culture, any religion, any language. I tell you, I love nothing more than going to speak in a church that is not English speaking, where I have to speak through an interpreter. You have to trust them that they're saying what you're saying, obviously. Otherwise, they could be preaching a completely different message. That could be why they invite me back, because the interpreter's preaching a different message. But I love nothing better than going to do that, because I just love being in those cultures with different people, whether it be Spain. I've been in Spain speaking to the gypsies, in Slovakia, in Poland, in Hungary, different countries in Africa. It's just, there's something about teaching about Jesus with people of a different language, different culture. It enables you to connect with them in a unique manner. But you know what? If you don't have compassion for these people, you can't do it because you don't care. But for me, it just, it energizes me beyond what you could ever imagine. It is the best thing ever, being compassionate. So when you go down Wolverhampton, when you go through Birmingham, and there's different cultures and there's different languages, we don't sit there and think nasty things towards people. But the compassion of Christ causes us to want to talk to these people and relate to them and show them how much Christ means to us and what Christ can do for them. You cannot be compassionate and racist. You cannot be compassionate and sexist. You cannot be compassionate and ageist and all these ists. You can't be, because when the compassion of Christ flows through you, it causes you to want to love people, whoever they are, whatever their background. Characteristics of a compassionate person: enables you to be considerate equally to friends and family and strangers. So it doesn't matter, some people will treat their family better than strangers. Some people will treat strangers better than their family if they don't like their family. But compassion will cause you to treat your friends, your family, and strangers equally. Why? Because they're people who are made in the image of Christ. A person who is compassionate is affectionate and is selfless. And I've just spotted the time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. The benefits of being compassionate. I've got 5. And being compassionate, it helps build powerful, lifelong relationships with people. Whether it be your spouse, your family, your colleagues, because people experience the generosity of your compassion. Yeah. People will trust you. People respect you because they know that you honor your word and that you have their best intentions in mind. People will be attracted to your energy. People were attracted to Jesus because he was a compassionate person. He had to go after he healed and after he spoke to the crowds. What did Jesus often do? He disappeared into solitude and quiet because he was known as a compassionate person, and the multitudes flocked to him. So if people see you walking down the road and then they suddenly cross over the road and walk the opposite way, maybe we have to work on being a little bit more compassionate to people. It may not be your deodorant. It may be that you need to be a little bit more compassionate. And the benefit of a compassionate person will allow you to impact many lives by speaking truth, encouraging them, and inspiring them. I want to be around people who inspire me. I don't want to be around people who are judging me all the time. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. We're all on the journey of becoming more Christ-like. I want to be around someone who is kind, caring, thoughtful, compassionate towards me. That's what I'm looking for. Now, in the last 10 minutes, how can we grow in being compassionate? So these are the important bits. How can we grow and try and grow to be more compassionate towards people? Number 1, this is so simple, but it's something with our busy, I don't like this phrase, but our busy lives, we often fail to do. Make time for others. It's as simple as that. If you want to be show compassion, make time for people. Time is one of the most valuable commodities we have. And you know what? When you make time for people, that's how you win people. If you never want to talk to people because you're too busy, it's great that you're busy. Congratulations. But you know what? People are not going to be able to see that they are important in your eyes if you don't spend time with them. And that's I believe, one of the most important things when it comes to a husband and wife, spending time or making time for each other. Yeah, we're so busy that before you realize that you're 40, you're 50, you're 60, 70, and then some people die, 80, 90, whatever your age. You know what? How do you make memories? By spending time with people. When you get older, and I'm obviously the other side of 50, and I've said this to Jenny so many times, I'm a task person, but the older that I get, the more I realize the value of relationships with people. I really do. They are one of the most important things that I can ever have. Secondly, look to connect with people on a daily basis. Now, I don't know if Lorraine can remember this, but we did some online work through lockdown, and we were talking about connecting. Can you remember, Lorraine? Yes, you can remember. Okay. And one of the questions was, who do you know who connects with people? Can you remember that, Lorraine? And what did you say? I bet you can't remember, can you? You pointed at me, if you remember. Yeah. I can see you nodding. Sorry, I know you're muted. Now, I'm not trying to brag here, but if you ask my wife, I'm messaging folk all the time. Texting, phoning, how you doing? What's going on? Why do you think I've got friends all over the world? Why do you think I know people in most European countries and I know all over the place? We can go on holiday. I can go to an airport and I'll probably guarantee I can be walking through some airport somewhere and there'll be somebody who's walking through that I know. Now, that's not to brag, but that's just because for me, I want to connect with people. The more I connect with people, the more it shows them that I value them as people. So I do this on a daily basis. I'll phone people up. I'll text them. How you doing? How you doing? What's going on? Now, some may get annoyed with me doing it all the time, but I'm doing it because I want to connect, show them that they're important. Thirdly, how can we grow in compassion? We can choose to support people by making ourselves approachable. Now, this is an interesting one because there's some people I know, if I look at their face, just looking at their face, it causes me to run in the opposite direction because they're just not approachable as people. You know, I know this sounds a bit daft to say, but, you know, some Christians just need to learn to smile. You know what I mean? And it's not because they've just filled their nappy like a child, but I mean, they need to smile because, you know what, they actually want to talk to somebody and support somebody and show and make them appear approachable. Yeah. Do we as people make other people feel comfortable to approach us? Or do we scare the living daylights out of some people? Just a question. It's very practical. Are you a safe person creating a safe environment for somebody to talk to? Or do you know that if they go and speak to you, everybody's going to know their business? Are you good at keeping confidence? Fourthly, we need to learn to be authentic. And I know this is a popular word that you hear bandied around all over the place. Be authentic. Why do I behave the way I do? You know, some people may think, oh, you're not a very good pastor or church leader because you joke or because you are real in front of people. I do that because I don't put myself on a pedestal of being better than anybody, because we are all equal. We are all the same. So anyone can talk to me. Anyone can speak to me. Anyone can spend time with me. And I know some pastors would be in the place where they are too high and mighty and too important that they will spend time with anybody. What a load of rubbish. Nobody is that important that we cannot spend time with somebody. And I'm not talking about being disrespectful here, because, you know, I realize that people respect people and things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the door is always open. Bishop Isaiah, head of Christ's Heart, if you go to Uganda and Kampala and the Mabritsi complex where his church is, he will get there first thing on a morning, and I'm talking 8 or 7 in the morning, and he will still be there at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And the queue of people waiting to see him at the door never ends. And he's there every day, spending time with people, accessible to people, willing to talk to people, willing to share and help and support folk. That's how we need to be. We need to be people who we are full of integrity and honesty in our words, actions, and behaviors and deeds. How can we grow in compassion? Here's an interesting one. Start to show compassion to yourself. So instead of beating yourself up because you made a mistake, instead of judging yourself and being unkind to yourself and saying unkind things to yourself. Practice self-compassion. Actually realize, you know what? To coin the Joyce Meyer phrase, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not where I used to be. I'm growing. I'm on a journey. I'm becoming more Christ-like. And you know what? Because sometimes we put too high expectations upon ourselves that we cannot meet. Practice self-compassion. And I like this one. Relax your judgment. That makes me smile. Relax your judgment. Relax your judgment. You know what? Some people are so judgmental of other people, they'll give themselves a heart attack. We've got so many. Let's go back to Ephesians 4, and time's running out. Verse 32, be kind to one another, be tender-hearted, forgive one another as Christ has forgiven us. Stop with all this judging folk and telling people off and, being God's judge and jury in the church. It's not needed. God encourages us to encourage. 2 things to finish. How can we grow in compassion? Live generous lives. And I don't want to give the game away, but all I can say, and this is a bit of a teaser, make sure you're there Sunday, because I will tell everybody what the church has given for the offering, and it will blow you away. That is all I'll say, because I am amazed, humbled beyond what you can realize. So you need to be there Sunday, because I will tell everybody what people have given, because God is good, and I'm amazed of the generosity of everybody. How can we be compassionate? Live generous lives. And finally, how can we grow in compassion? I said about being full of self-compassion. Well, some of us just need to spend time finding healing of some of the trauma that we've gone through. Because some of the trauma that we've gone through is spoiling our life, if I can use that phrase. Because some of us are so beautiful as people, but the trauma that we've gone through is causing us to be, at times, not very compassionate, not very nice. And yet, God says, I've shown you compassion. I've taken the hurt and the pain and the suffering upon myself so that we don't have to live as human beings like that anymore. So one of the best ways that we can grow in compassion is to be compassionate to ourselves and allow God to be compassionate to us, to bring healing and freedom from some of the trauma that we've been through. Okay, so that's my teaching on the value of compassion. I have 4 questions if you want to write them down, not for any feedback as such. So if you're watching on YouTube, write these questions down, go away. This is your homework, and just think, reflect on some of these and just think, number 1, how can I be more compassionate towards myself? Now, you didn't expect that as a first question, did you? How can I become more compassionate towards myself? How can I become more compassionate towards myself? Number 2, think of someone who you could show compassion to. Who could you be compassionate towards? Think of somebody that, whoever it is. It could be somebody at work, it could be somebody in your family, it could be somebody in church, it could be somebody, one of your neighbors, it could be a friend, it could be your husband or your wife. I think I may need some marital counseling with some. No, I'm joking. Think of someone who you could show compassion towards. And then number 3, not only think of someone who you could show compassion towards, but what does that look like? what does that compassion look like? So, for example, I'll just pick on my wife. I'm going to be more compassionate to Jenny. And she's smiling. Thank God for that, she says. So what does that look like? What am I going to do? How is that going to, what have I got to do to be more compassionate to her? And how is that going to have an effect on her? And then finally, how can you grow in compassion towards people? This is more of a general one. The first one was being compassionate towards yourself. The second one was being specific compassion towards a person. And then thirdly, what does that look like? And then the final one is, how can you grow? What can you do to grow in compassion specifically to you? What steps, which actually, I need to do this. I need to do that. In fact, I need to make more time for people, or I need to stop judging people, whatever it may be. Yeah. So those are things. But as a church, we want to become a church that is known for being compassionate. I don't want to be a church that is known for being judgmental, nasty, unsupportive, unloving, uncaring. Because, for the Spirit of God to flow through us, we've got to learn to release compassion to people. Yeah, we've got to learn to be able to be kind, to learn to be able to, every time Jesus was moved with compassion, or nearly every time in the Gospels, he healed somebody. He was moved with compassion, he healed them. He moved with compassion, he healed them. So I am fully convinced that for us to see healing in church and to see God as the river of healing flowing through us, one of the ways that we can release that is by becoming more compassionate towards people. Amen. Do you agree? I hope you do. So, guys, for you guys who have been watching on YouTube, I'm going to end the recording or end the live stream. Thank you for watching. Join us next Tuesday again. We're going to be looking at honesty and integrity. If you can hop on Zoom, that's great. If not, I'll see you. Well, I won't see you, but because I can't see you, but hopefully you'll be on YouTube next Tuesday as well. The recording will be on YouTube straight after this. It will automatically get posted. So God bless